Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Bader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hey friends, Jason here. So in this episode, I decided to do something a little different. It's been a long time since I have done a solo episode, and my editors have mentioned to me that it'd be nice to hear a solo, so here we go. It's so weird not having a guest on the other side, but that's all right. I'm going to roll through this and just share a little something that's been coming up a lot in my practice. The idea that we really need to work on development plans for the people who work with us and for us, especially the newest people in our organizations. This episode is brought to you by Connected Peers, an online peer collaboration platform for distribution professionals. Let's face it, most managers don't have the opportunity to speak with their industry peers about common challenges in their departments. Sure, they might see each other at an annual conference, but that hardly provides any real relationship building or continuity. What if there was a forum to solve challenges with those in your same role? Well, now there is. The concept is simple. Purchasing managers meeting with purchasing managers, training managers meeting with training managers, marketing managers meeting with marketing managers. You get the idea. There are 10 unique role-based communities to choose from. These are monthly, facilitated meetings all via Zoom. Ask questions and receive feedback from people who understand the challenges of your position. Isn't it time that you quit going it alone? To learn more and find your peers, visit us at www.connectedpeers.com. I know it's a tough recruiting environment out there, and trying to entice young people to take a good hard look at distribution. I'll tell you, as I've often said in this show, distribution's got a PR problem. We don't advertise really well about how really cool that distribution is, and this particular sector has got so much opportunity, and people can have responsibility at such a young age. And it's really a message that we don't get out there enough. But I think one of the big failures is that we don't know how to sell that opportunity. We don't know how to sell the advancement opportunities inside of our organizations. We just assume that people will be able to read the tea leaves when they come in our buildings, or frankly, even in the interview process, that they'll be saying, wow, I can really get to this stage or that stage in this amount of time. And I think we have to learn to connect the dots for people. Those of us who've been around the block a long time, we've been in distribution a long time, and we have this mental progression of how someone advances in the organization. And sure, it might be ingrained in in ourselves, but being able to share that progression in a logical way to a new candidate, for example, is a little difficult. Every candidate that comes across, especially the youngest ones, they really want to know, how do I advance in the organization? And sometimes when we get asked that question, we get caught flat-footed. We really don't know how to answer that. It's like, well, you work hard and you show up on time and opportunities will open up for you. Well, that's great, but if we were to actually take the time to explain how someone does advance, and we can actually show documentation on that advancement opportunity and that possibility, I think it would go a long way to selling what we have to offer. So one of the things that I've worked on with several clients is formalizing the progression. Now, again, those of us have been around distribution a lot, and especially, again, I grew up in the construction-related distribution services, and there was an informal progression that just was kind of known to us. For example, you might have gotten recruited into the warehouse, and so you work in that warehouse, and you've learned that whole process of picking orders, putting away things, receiving. There's just a whole myriad of different learning that occurs during this process. And then maybe during that time, you're going to be asked to drive one of the delivery vehicles, or, spend some time working with common carriers or something of that nature. And then, you get a little bit better at it. You're given more responsibility. Maybe you get to train a couple of people. And then eventually you work your way into an opportunity to go into the counter. So this is kind of becoming that first customer-facing selling position in most organizations. So you go to the counter, Maybe you handle, wheel calls, you can do some add-on orders, and you can greet some people coming in if you have a showroom. And then you get a little bit better at that. Then ultimately you start moving into what would be considered inside phone sales or customer support or customer sales. And then you spend a little time there. You get pretty good at it. People know your name. You start to be able to give decent advice after a point. Then you go into outside sales, and then that becomes that pinnacle job. So that's really the progression that you see. And as we know in distribution, we've got a whole lot of other opportunities, such as, in the purchasing team, in the finance realm. We have opportunities in branch management. Inside sales actually can take on a life of its own into outbound sales. But again, that was never really shared in this mental progression that we've had. You just kind of fell into those positions after you reached a certain point. Now, a lot of us have that progression in between our ears. I mean, we've got that laid out. We know and we've seen that over the years. But why wouldn't we ever take the time to actually write it down? Why wouldn't we take the time to, put it in a way that we could share that with a prospective candidate when posed with that question, how do I advance in the organization? We can pay it lip service. We can talk about it, but remember, some of the people that are meeting these candidates for the first time are not necessarily someone who has been through that progression. So what I've been challenged to do over the years, and I've worked with a few different clients on this, is actually write out that progression and create this advancement type of documentation so we can share that and really help develop candidates and help them on their career journey. I mean, I'm truly a believer that each manager has that incumbent responsibility to make people better than when they found them. And that includes development. I mean, training and development. That's a big part of what that manager is supposed to be doing during this time. So what I did with a couple of different clients is we started to create a system where there were tiers in each one of these positions. So for example, when someone entered the warehouse, day one, entry level, they come in, we might start them at what we would call material handling 0 or entry level material handling, and we'll call them an MH0 just for lack of a better expression. Now, in order to become an MH1, that would be that next level forward, that person has to learn 10 skills. So this is, again, very important that you've got to go through and actually identify what are those skills we want someone to learn very early on as they're working with us in order to be considered advanced, just starting to advance along the career progression. So maybe MH1, you've got to, learn how, learn when the broom is to sweep the floor, or learn, the bin locations and be able to look at the bin map. Or maybe, you need to learn how to use a handheld scanner, something of that nature. So again, I think that the people that are working in these positions can obviously come up with these 10, beginning skill level tasks that somebody has to master. So in order, again, to be that MH1, they have to demonstrate mastery in these 10 skills. And then I also like to inject a little bit of maybe some of the manufacturers that are on the shelf or some of the products that are sold. So often we have access to video content by these manufacturers and some product knowledge videos and things like that. So I would, generally speaking, I would include that in that first level of learning, that first piece to become an MH1. This episode of Distribution Talk is sponsored by InSQL Distribution Software. InSQL is a fully functional distribution-based software package. I say distribution-based because that's important. Many alternatives out there say they do distribution, but they really aren't very good at it. They're generally watered-down manufacturing packages with a few distribution features tacked on. I only recommend software packages that were purpose-built to serve distribution, and these folks do it very well at a price point many smaller distributors can afford. If you're ready to step up to a fully loaded, scalable distribution package at an affordable price, look no further than InSQL Distribution Software at www.insql.com. That's INXSQL.com. So then let's say you go to the MH2. Well, let's do 10 additional skills that need to be mastered. then I would probably inject, maybe 5 to 7 different product lines, or, products that are very, very common in our business, or some of those key products that you're going to build on your skills. I might also require that person go in one of our delivery vehicles, if that's the way that you get products to market. And it'd be great if they could spend some time, delivering products in these vehicles, so they understand what that work environment is for that customer. And so really, again, starting to become face-to-face, starting to learn, where does the customer work in order to become now this next level. So let's say that, we're going to shoot for that MH3 designation. So in MH3, you might, again, come up with 10 additional skills, and then we would add additional product videos. And at this point, I'm also going to start injecting some video-based work or some sort of training around our ERP. So especially around the order entry and how to find price and availability on products, but just starting to get them in the habit of really being able to tickle the keys and utilizing the offerings from our software manufacturers. And I know sometimes there's not always the greatest offerings, but there are trainings of some sort. But we've got to start getting these folks very familiar with something that's going to be the backbone of information for them as they progress through their career. Now, in addition to that, I might add another element. I would like this person, this candidate, this MH3 candidate, to maybe spend some time with one of our field sales personnel. So go out on a couple of selling days and just see, how does the sales of the organization work? What does this side of the fence look like? So now we're starting to build a really good background for this individual, and they're moving through this progression. Now at MH3, this is where we can start changing it up a little bit. I think at this point, when somebody becomes an MH3, they become counter ready, or ready to kind of move inside and into that customer selling function. This was one of the big challenges with one of the clients I was working with, that they were having a very difficult time moving people from that warehouse environment over to the counter environment. There was a huge chasm between the two of those. And so part of the challenge that was given to me was to see if we could bridge that a little bit. And really, this tiered system was really ideally set to get people counter ready. But I think there's a really important piece right here. We need to now start learning which direction this person might be going in their career. And so I'm a huge advocate of putting employee testing in here. And it's really that personality testing. And there's several different companies that do it. You've got Caliper, you've got Predictive Index. I know that Wonderlic has and some people use DISC, whatever. It's more of a behavioral type of testing. And what we're really looking for here, this personality profiling, is, where is this person probably best suited? With their personality type. And the thing that's always gotten me is, we've always believed that field sales job has been that pinnacle job, and people have rushed towards that pinnacle field sales job really because it paid better. I mean, it was just the money. But ultimately, if we had that testing in place and we had listened and looked at that and realized, man, these folks are really, really good inside, or they might be better in a management track, towards branch management or whatnot, we would have prevented a very uncomfortable situation. And I remember, several people that went through the organization, that I grew up in, and they would go into that outside sales position and it would just be brutal. I mean, they'd flail miserably. And then it was very uncomfortable for them to realize and, admit that this was not the best position for them, and to come inside and try something different. That was often a point when we lost really, really great people. And so I think if we had stopped and, looked at some sort of personality assessment and really worked with that individual to help develop their career path, we could have prevented some of these, great people from leaving the organization. So again, at that MH3, I'm going to start doing some testing. And then at that point, we're going to come inside. Now, that's a possibility. Some people don't want to leave that warehouse environment. And I think we have to make space for that. We have to make room for that. That if somebody wants to make a career out of that warehouse environment, we should be able to develop that. So again, somebody can move towards an MH4. Now, an MH4, in my opinion, is really starting you down the trail of that warehouse management and organization and supervision. So I think in order to become that MH4 candidate, you've got, again, some more skill sets to add on, but this is also where I'm going to start adding some leadership things and some soft skills and some supervisory skills and coaching skills, because ultimately now they're going to be in a supervisory position. They're going to need to know how to deal with difficult situations and difficult individuals, and they're going to have to learn how to be a coach, not just a manager of one. Now we're going to have become a manager of many. In this type of role, I would say you're coming into perhaps being a shipping, manager, or perhaps you'd be the receiving manager, one of the pinnacle jobs in that warehouse environment. And then maybe an assistant manager for the warehouse, or a dispatcher. That might be another role that is possible at that MH4 level. And then ultimately, as you progress, you might be able to work yourself into that MH5, and an MH5 might be your manager of that entire facility, or it could be a shift manager or something like that. As you can see, though, we don't necessarily have to jump out of that warehouse environment if you choose to stay in there. But then if they do decide to go to the inside route, we can certainly create a new progression there. An inside sales 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., based on, again, added skills and where that person's career development is going to go. I think there's, one of the biggest mistakes that we've had is we just don't know how to develop people once they get to a certain point. And so I think with this progression, if you start really articulating the progression and really give it some thought, really line out what are the things we want people to master in order to move on to that next tier, then we're going to have candidates that are ready for that next challenge going forward. And we can develop that bench of talent. I think one of the most challenging things for us is when we have, an opening. Someone leaves us for one reason or another, and then all of a sudden we're like, okay, well, who's ready to go? And unfortunately, sometimes it tends to be, we look at that longevity, who has been there the longest, rather than the person who has developed their skills the greatest. And so I think if you develop this tiered progression, then you can see who has been putting in the work, who's doing the trainings, who wants to develop and who wants to move forward in their career. Then we can start making some different decisions and better decisions about backfilling and moving people in when we have those openings. This kind of work is going to give us one of the best opportunities to allow people to progress at their own pace. The other thing I really love about this is that once we do the legwork of creating the progression, and obviously it could be modified, tweaked, and frankly, this progression can be in any aspect of the organization. I had a great conversation with my purchasing managers group today, and we talked about, that when somebody comes onto their team, well, we could start them at a purchasing 1 and purchasing 2 and purchasing 3 and move through. And they really jumped on this concept. So all of these different roles that we have in the organization can have tiers and development tiers, because I think, again, we just are not very good at a certain point in developing people and keeping them on a development path. So the thing that I love about this is it is self-directed. Once you create this entire structure, now we put a person into that entry level. We show them the progression and say, all right, in order for you to progress to an MH1, MH2, etc., or any of these roles, you've got to do the work. And you have to go and get your supervisor and say, I'd like you to test me on these skills. Have I completed these skills to your satisfaction? So again, it's self-directed. They move themselves through the progression. They are the ones who are getting tested. In other words, the supervisor or that manager, they're not constantly hounding people. Hey, have you learned this? Have you learned that? They're not constantly dragging them through the progression. The associate is moving themselves through. And I think that's just really a key point. Also, it helps that manager look and say, all right, who are my go-getters? Who are the ones that really want to progress in this organization? And if we look at, all right, well, where are you on the testing? Where are you in the progression? You can see who's going to rise to the top. And really, that's going to funnel that bench of talent that I spoke about. And I think this just makes too much darn sense for me, and as I said, I've seen this, I've put this into place in a couple of different organizations, varying degrees of difference. But I think you all understand the concept. If you do the time and you work on this and you build it, then man, can you imagine if a candidate that you're sitting down with, let's just say, a really attractive candidate, somebody that you really want to join the organization, and they're asking you some tough questions. And I think the question ultimately comes up, how do I advance in your organization? And frankly, this is something that the youngest candidates are going to ask you. These are characteristics of the newest generation coming in. They want to know, how do I advance here? Is this going to be worth my while? How long am I going to be here before I get to, have some responsibility? And when they pose that question, if you were able to say, well, let me show you and lay out this document or open a spreadsheet and say, this is how the progression works. Man, you look better than a whole lot of other employers out there. You actually get to show them, here's how you advance. We have thought this through and we are all about developing the person. That's going to go a long way with that candidate. Take that time, get excited about this, work through the kinks. Frankly, the people doing the job are going to be the ones who will help you develop what skills need to be at each progression. Those are the folks to ask about how to do this. But I will say, this is probably one of the things that I would recommend in so many companies today. Too often we are, relying on, our gut level. Yep, this is how we advance. And it all just falls between our ears. If we actually can get something down on paper, man, we're going to be a whole lot better than we are today. I hope you're willing to take this suggestion to heart. This is a tough endeavor. Make no mistake. This is going to require work and energy. But if you are willing to do this, I guarantee that you are going to have a better program. You're going to be developing people and really helping people along their progression, because it's not about us. It's about them and how we can help them along their career progression. If you need help getting started, please don't hesitate to reach out. Take care. Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider sharing with your friends and colleagues. And don't forget to follow the show on your favorite podcast application. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by the brilliant team at the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, the Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.